Hello, I'm Jon Delano, KDKA-TV political editor. Thanks for joining us for Inside Pennsylvania Politics. Over the next 5 weeks, we're going to be bringing you weekly political discussions in the run-up to Pennsylvania's primary election on April 23rd. We have assembled a panel of young, politically active Pennsylvanians from diverse backgrounds and opinions to gauge what they think of the issues confronting the Commonwealth and the country, and to weigh in on the candidates from local races all the way to the presidential campaign. Elections are about the future, so who better to talk about that than the young? So when we designed this show, I said, let me be the only old guy on the panel. And that's exactly what we're doing. Joining us on the left side of our panel, Shelley Picklick, a Mount Lebanon Democrat, mom of 5 kids, ages 3 to 16, and former nursery school president. And Christian Sesek, an attorney, chair of the Fayette County New Deal Democrats and 2020 Biden delegate. On the right side with the Republicans, Rico Elmore, a hydraulic mechanic with the 171st Air Refueling and vice chair of the Beaver County Republican Committee. And Madison Campbell, Lawrenceville Republican and health executive. Now, the Pennsylvania primary election is on Tuesday, April 23rd, so let's get a refresher of the races on the ballot. There are 3 competitive statewide primaries, along with 2 local primaries for U.S. representative. 5 Democrats are competing to be the nominee for Attorney General. They are former Pennsylvania Auditor General Eugene DePasquale, former Bucks County Solicitor Joe Kahn, former Philadelphia Chief Public Defender Kier Bradford Gray, State Representative Jared Solomon of Philadelphia, and Delaware County District Attorney Jack Stolzheimer. 2 Republicans are running for their party's nomination to be Attorney General. They are York County District Attorney Dave Sunday and State Representative Craig Williams from Delaware and Chester counties. For Auditor General, only the Democratic primary is contested. Those candidates are State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta of Philadelphia and Lehigh County Controller Mark Pinsley. For the contested Democratic primary for State Treasurer, the candidates are State Representative Ryan Bizzarro from the Erie area and businesswoman Erin McClellan from Allegheny County. And we have 2 competitive primaries for U.S. Representative in Western PA. In District 12, incumbent Representative Summer Lee is being challenged by Edgewood Borough Council member Bhavani Patel. In the 14th District, 2 Democrats are competing to be the candidate who takes on Republican incumbent Guy Reschenthaler in November. They are Ken Bache, a small business owner from Westmoreland County, and Chris Jados, an Indiana County native and policy advisor to the U.S. Space Force. Now, we want to get right into it with our panel and start with a focus on the issues. With this question, panelists, what do you think is the most important issue facing Pennsylvania today? Madison, let's start with you.
Well, I have to say the most important issue facing Pennsylvania is the economy. You know, simply put, 4 years ago, whenever I went to the grocery store, my bill was not as high as it is now. You know, I was just at the grocery store about a week ago, and cereal was nearly $7.
And not just $7, but the size of the packaging is a lot smaller.
You're getting a lot less cereal for your money nowadays. And I think that that is really impacting young professionals like myself and also families. And I think at the end of the day, we really need to worry about the families and what inflation does to them.
Shelley, you're the family person on this show. So
I am the family person.
So tell us about what you think is the most important issue facing Pennsylvania.
Well, listen, I want us to be in a position where I feel like the economy is the most important thing facing Pennsylvania. And I say that because what I think is really the most important thing facing Pennsylvania as we run up to the general election in November is the protection of our democracy. And I think that's the case because of who's running in the race and the way that's all shaking out. I wish that this was something we didn't have to worry about right now. And if you had told me 10 years ago that I would have given this answer, I would have said you're crazy. But I think it is the most pressing issue at the moment with the economy just behind, because I don't like paying $7 for cereal either.
Yeah, who does?
A lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah, who does? Rico, what do you think? From your perspective, you're out there in Beaver County.
Oh, yes.
What is the #1 issue facing Pennsylvania right now?
I believe the #1 issue facing Pennsylvania is the working class family. every day, every night, we have to look at our children and we have to ask, what are we going to do to sustain? We have mothers, fathers, sometimes aunts, uncles contributing to the family in order to sustain. We have to figure out what's going to sustain our families, and that comes with the policies that our legislators, state and federal, make. So we have to really hone in on that. Looking at the family and listening to what the family's issues are is the number one thing that we have to focus on.
I may come back to that in just a second because I want to know a little more about what those issues are that affect working families that are so important. But Christian, let me give you a chance at the same question from a Democratic perspective. What do you think?
The pain of being last, possibly because the two answers have already been covered based on polling when I was looking prior to preparing here. But I think that the economy is important. I think that the issues regarding the economy are ultimately what voters are going to base what happens in November on. You know, when they experience, like my example was going to be my electric bill. In 2020, my electric bill was probably 30% less than it is now, and I've seen that rise and felt that rise, and I've had to make budgetary cutbacks just like most Americans, and I feel that that is going to be one of the most important issues that many people base their vote on coming in November, especially when I talk to folks around Fayette County and in my neighborhood. That seems to be the theme again and again.
Well, do you think democracy is on the line?
I absolutely do. And in fact, that was the second most popular answer in the poll that I had looked at. I believe that when you have an individual who is openly, you know, just this past weekend, talking about the individuals that incited the insurrection on January 6th and saying that he will pardon them, saying that that's not an issue. It's a concern. It's a grave concern for our country and what our founders intended for everyone to have their opportunity to speak and the peaceful transfer of power.
Well, let me come back to you, Rico, because you mentioned the need to really address issues affecting working families. And frankly, both parties, Democrats and Republicans, want to talk to working families and try to talk to them. What are some of the specific issues that you'd like to see politicians and candidates address when it comes to working families?
Well, when you look at working families, there are many issues. For the day-to-day activities of going to work, as I mentioned earlier, it takes two parents to go to work and provide for the family. But the jobs that are out there, the job market, a lot of jobs ask you to have a college degree or even have experience or before they hire you. So how can you get that without getting hired for that job or get that experience? I think that we need to bring that back to like in schools, colleges, trade schools, where you can get the experience as you're on the job.
Yeah. Any of the others want to chime in on this? Go ahead.
I would
Melissa.
love to. Housing prices. I think, you know, as somebody, I'm 28 years old, there's no way that I can afford a house right now. And thinking about the rising interest rates, it's just absolutely incredible to think about the notion of even buying a house. I know that I'm going to be in a position of renting for a very, very long time, and I think that that is something that we really, really need to address.
Yeah, housing costs, clearly.
And I think that to the point on working families, one of the issues that hits very close to home for me is that my dad is a steel worker. And I've watched my dad, as he's approaching retirement, wear himself out over time working in a manual labor capacity. And one of the things that I think is just so critical and that is on the ballot this election possibly is the discussion about raising the age for collecting Social Security. I think that a lot of people who are working class, in my opinion, deserve the opportunity to perhaps retire sooner rather than later, given that they, you know, go in day out and do some of the toughest jobs in this country. And so that's one thing that, coming from a working class family, I feel is so important.
Well, as the old guy on this panel, thank you. I'd love to retire early. Is that the idea here? But you realize, of course, that would mean you might have to work harder in order to support those of us who retire early.
Well, fortunately, you know, my dad has told me so many times that, you know, the office job was the way to go, and I have no qualms about working longer because, you know, they say that lawyers never really retire. So.
That's true. That's true.
That's
Sally,
true.
we'll give you the last word on
Sure. Well, and let's think, you know, you raised an interesting point about Social Security and about people and the need to work longer into their lives. I, as a parent of children ages 3 all the way up to 16, I'm starting to think about more of the beginning of that part of a person's life too, and the expenses associated with higher education. And that's another big issue as we talk about working families and as they're, you know, looking to provide for those families into their next phase of their lives, considering the rising costs of higher education are important in the state as well.
Yeah. All righty, well, thank you again. We'll be right back to you for more, I know. Consistently, year after year, when it comes to casting their vote, young people stay home more than any other age group. Coming up, how our local high schools stack up when it comes to registering to vote, and what's being done to get kids more engaged in their government. Stick with us. Oh, and the top of the ticket is set, and polls are showing a statistical dead heat. Coming up, we ask our panels what they think of Joe Biden or Donald Trump, what they need to do to win this November. One of the hardest things for campaigns to do consistently in an election year is get young people to vote. A Los Angeles-based civics group says that although tens of thousands of Pennsylvanians turn 18 each year, most of them do not register to vote. As I found, it's not unique here, but it could make a big difference in this must-win state for the presidency. Consider the following. Donald Trump won Pennsylvania in 2016 by 44,000 votes. 4 years later, Joe Biden won by 81,000 votes. Guess who could have made the difference both times?
In the Commonwealth as a whole, it's about 160,000 people are turning 18 every year, and it's 70,000 in the major metropolitan areas.
Laura Brill, CEO of the Civic Center, says over 70% of this state's 18-year-olds have not yet registered to vote. And it often depends on how seriously local school districts take civics education and nonpartisan registration drives at their high schools.
We looked in detail, for example, at Allegheny County, and a couple of districts are in the high 40%, but some are below 10. So it really depends on whether schools are involved, parents, and the students themselves.
In Allegheny County, South Fayette, with 47.5% of 18-year-olds registered to vote, is the top district, followed by Pittsburgh Public Schools at 43.5. The top 10 also includes West Jefferson, Northgate, Keystone Oaks, Char Valley, Deer Lakes, Moon, North Allegheny, and Quaker Valley.
Many young people are very passionate about social issues and political issues, but aren't sure how to actually make change, and voting is the first step in political participation.
18-year-old Paige Westbrook, a South Fayette senior, is one of the organizers of a spring and fall voter registration drive at her high school. Her student committee makes a presentation to all seniors in class, handing out and collecting voter registration forms. One key:
it is a student-run program. People can listen to their teachers tell them to vote all day, whether it be their government teachers or their econ teachers or their parents. But when it's coming from a peer who you're handing the form back to, it's a bit more of a process that you know is important because it's something that your peers care about.
Michael Sipper, a 19-year-old Pitt freshman who registered in high school, says today's online registration makes social media key too.
Social media and also text banks are an incredibly powerful tool in order for the younger generation to come out to vote, because of course a lot of the younger generation is predominantly on their phones.
The Civic Center will be in Pittsburgh in March, hosting a workshop for local high school teachers and students on how to increase their voter registration. I have a link at KDKA.com. Jon Delano, KDKA-TV News. Now, coming up, a presidential rematch in November. What will it take to give either candidate a second term? We're putting the question to our panel next. Welcome back to Inside PA Politics. I'm Jon Delano. Both Donald Trump and Joe Biden have enough delegates to be the presumptive nominees for their parties, which won't become official until the conventions later this summer. But we know the odds are we're getting a 2020 rematch. So the question I'd like to pose to the panel, what does Donald Trump or Joe Biden need to do to win Pennsylvania? Let's start with the Democrats this time. Shelley, what does Joe Biden need to do to win Pennsylvania?
Well, let's first acknowledge that these are not candidates that most voters are excited about. I think we've agreed on this group. That includes us. But I think knowing that this is who we have, if we want Joe Biden to win Pennsylvania, I think he's really going to need to remind voters of what it was like to have Donald Trump as our president. I think it's easy to forget sort of the chaos and instability in which we were living under a Trump administration, and Biden's going to need to do a good job of reminding us what that felt like. And I think he's also going to need to show us through actions, through the people with whom he surrounds himself, that he's sort of a placeholder for this generation, and that we will be moving on to a younger group of candidates next, almost inevitably based on his age and the age of Donald Trump as well.
Yeah, they're both relatively the same age when
They
you're
sure
old.
are. I mean, we talk about it like, oh, Joe Biden's
No,
so
I'm younger
old.
than both. I mean, I
Yeah.
am younger than both. So thank you very much. I am the old
Clearly.
guy. But Madison, what do you think? What does Donald Trump need to do to win Pennsylvania?
Donald Trump needs to win suburban women, and specifically in the collar counties in Pennsylvania. Obviously, Pennsylvania is crucial for this election, and if he's not focusing on suburban women, he will lose. And specifically with Biden, he just needs to stay awake. Obviously, during the State of the Union, he took some Panera lemonade and was quite awake, but oftentimes he is slurring his words and he does not know what it's even like to be president.
Would you agree with that, Christian?
I disagree. I think that Joe Biden has definitely done a great job in the 4 years in his time in office. We have an infrastructure package. We have chip manufacturing that's going to come back to the United States. He's doing the job of a president, but let's not undercut one thing, and that's Bobby Jr. Bobby Kennedy Jr., when I looked at most recent polls, 5%, 9% in another poll, and both candidates need to figure out where those votes are going to peel from, because I remember 2016 where Gary Johnson got less than 3% of the vote, and that was a lot of the deciding factor for who flipped Pennsylvania.
Yeah, there was no question the third-party candidates in 2016 affected the outcome. Donald Trump won that election. What do you think, Rico? You are the vice chair of the Beaver County Republican Party, and that Republican Party in Beaver County really means a lot to a candidate running for president.
It definitely does. In Beaver County, we just flipped from being solely a Democratic county to moving to being a Republican county, and that's a huge feat, and I thank everyone in Beaver County for doing that. But when you look at the candidates that we have, look at Donald Trump as a candidate, in order to win, he has to be relatable. He has to come down, he has to talk to the families, he has to talk to the constituents, and when he presents himself and puts forth, policy, they need to reflect what the people need and not what the overall government needs. We need to take government out of the equation and input the people to have a better understanding of the needs of those people.
Yeah. Do you think overall that this race is just going to bore people, or do you think people are going to get excited, young people in particular? Are they going to get excited about this race?
I don't think it's either. I don't think we're bored. I think people are trepidatious about this race, nervous about the outcome of this race maybe. But I agree, it doesn't feel like a lot of excitement in the air. I feel like a lot of folks are deciding between the lesser of two evils, for lack of a better term.
I mean, I went to rallies, certainly in 2016. Donald Trump packed them in. Today's rallies, he's not getting anywhere near what he got before.
Sure.
And Joe Biden never really had a big rally when he ran in 2020 because of COVID. What do you think, Madison?
Specifically with Joe Biden, I think we're going to see a lot of young people sitting out the election entirely, specifically on Biden's perspective on Israel. That is going to take an entire voting bloc that is going to refuse to vote because of Biden's opinion on Israel.
Do you agree, Christian? You're another young voter. Do you think the Palestine issue means much, and is it compensated by the abortion issue?
I personally think that Joe Biden has been the first candidate to actually take a stance on student loan debt. And I think that a lot of young people realizing that we have the burden when it comes to buying property, when it comes to trying to elevate ourselves and to repay tons of student loan debt. I'm staring down the end of a lot of student loan debt, and I think that outside of the apathy, I do believe that younger people are appreciative of his efforts, though they didn't actually pan out to be as much as he had anticipated.
Well, thank you. This has been a great panel discussion. We'll be back in just a few minutes. When we come back, we'll get some final thoughts from our panel. As we come to the end of our first show, let me ask for a quick answer from each of our panelists. Despite two of the oldest candidates for president in American history, do you think younger voters will vote this year? How important is that? Christian, let me start with you.
I'm curious to see what impact social media influencers have. on getting out the vote. I understand that a lot of people with large followings are doing a lot to try and encourage younger voters on TikTok, on Instagram Reels, to get out and actually get involved in the process. And I think that their role is every bit as critical as any rally that might happen for a candidate.
Madison, I know you do social media. Do you think that's important? Is that going to get younger voters out?
No, because younger voters believe that their vote doesn't matter because no one is listening to them. And it is our job, both Democrats and Republicans, to show young people that their votes actually matter in this election.
Shelley, how do you feel? Younger voters, are they going to come to the polls?
Well, you know, as the parent of teenagers, I am not in the business of underestimating young people. And I do believe that young voters understand how important this election is, even though they might not be fired up about these particular candidates. And yes, their vote matters. And I expect that we'll see them at the polls in the fall.
Rico, you get the last word. What do you think? Younger voters coming out?
I think the younger voters are coming out, and they're going to come out in force because it's important, because people have fought for the right to vote, and these younger people are not going to give that up. They're going to come out to vote no matter what, rain, snow, sleet, or whatever. They're coming, and it's very important for them to come out. And I'm going to go out there and I'm going to bring them to the polls. I'm going to help them get to the polls.
Well, I sure hope you're right, although I know we've got split opinions on this one. But thank you again, panelists, for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching us. You can watch this stream every Thursday and Friday at 11 a.m. for the next 5 weeks. And we're airing on KDKA Plus on Sundays at 12:30. Thanks again to our panelists, and thanks to you for watching. If you have a suggestion for this show, send me an email at jdelano@kdka.com. Remember, our government is only as good as you make it. Have a great day, everyone.